Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the PGA edition. It is November, almost Thanksgiving, and we're I guess in the 2017 PGA season. Who knows what time it is? We just finished the election. We're in NFL and NBA. Hockey's going on. It's madness in the world right now. I'm joined to just have a second to talk PGA is Colin and Pete, as always. Colin, what's going on, dude?
Just embracing the madness, just like you said. Everything's going on in the sports world, and so it's one of those great times where it's like April and October are always my favorite. You get a little bit of both. April will be fun with the Masters come next year for sure. But yeah, I think we have a little bit of a break coming up after this, so this is going to be a goodbye for a while. But we'll certainly pick it up in 2017 when it comes back.
Right, Pete, what's going on, man?
Well, moving on from last week. Last week wasn't my best in a lot of regards, so ready to move on. And, I guess some humble pie and just trying to work hard and excited to play a little PGA. Definitely been fun with basketball and the NHL and obviously NFL. So it's definitely a peak time for DFS and just ready to keep the grind going. Did you go Waiters Island tonight, Pete? Yeah, I have Waiters. He's actually picking it up a little bit. My teams are good, really good. My NBA it's been a really, really solid start to NBA.
Nice.
So I can't complain in that regard. But just ready to roll.
Sweet, yeah. So we're going to discuss the RSM Classic. It's the PGA tournament. Interestingly enough, the Euro tournament this week actually has a better feel. It has some interesting names. Henrik Stenson, Rory McIlroy are playing in that. This RSM Classic is not quite as exciting in terms of the top-tier talent, but they have the bigger tournaments on DraftKings. They have the 100K for the 90K dog leg. So most of the money on DraftKings is in the PGA side, so that is what we're going to discuss. So let's get right into it. RSM Classic takes place in the state of Georgia at Sea Island, Georgia, Sea Island Golf Club. Interestingly, it takes place at two different courses. This started last year. There's a seaside course and a plantation course. Players will play both of them on Thursday, Friday, and then they will switch and play just the seaside course on Friday. Colin, I'm interested, what your numbers are saying as far as this tournament goes and sort of how you treat it or if you just ignore it.
So you can actually kind of get that answer organically because not only is it played on two different courses, so it could be a blend of different fits, but it also has only 1 year of history at this course, or I guess courses as we're calling it. And that plays out from a data perspective as a particularly weak course fit, maybe something like a quarter, a fifth of the strength, like probably one of the weakest course fits I've seen, which makes sense because, let's take an extreme example. Like if one was a pure power course and the other was an accuracy course, they'd kind of net each other out and there wouldn't be really a dominant skill set that's required. Throw in the fact that it's a low sample size and I'm giving course fit just like zero, like almost like no weight this week. Kind of similar with course history. It's only 1 year. It's very volatile, not nearly as predictive. So just go back to the basics. I feel like we've been saying that a lot in maybe in this like October, November kind of like post FedEx Cup stretch, but like it is consistent with the type of tournaments that they field here. So just back to the basics. Long-term adjusted round, everybody's favorite. And recent GIR. Sorry, Pete. That was disrespectful on my part.
Recent GIR. Yeah, Pete's all about the recent GIR.
I'm the recent GIR guy, and I know that a lot of people give me crap about that, but that's fine. I don't care. I'm rolling with it. That's one of the stats I like. Makes sense to me.
To be fair, so what I've read about this course is that it is in the top 6 easiest in both fairways hit and greens in regulation. With percentages of at least 71.65 in both statistics. That's per Rob Bolton at PGAtour.com. Friend of the podcast was on the podcast actually a little bit ago. So Rob threw out that set. So I know we've sort of discussed this, but I honestly can't remember the answer, Colin. When something is the easiest in fairways hit and greens in regulation, does that mean that we should take guys who can do it, or should we value things opposite of that because everyone's going to be able to sort of hit the greens,
I mean, I like in terms of like what particular skill sets you want to target, like I really think that should shake out in course fit. And like if there was something, a particular aspect of a person's game, it would kind of play out and kind of shake out in course fit. the fact that there just isn't a huge course fit here, it's all relative to expectations. So, and like the only thing that I think that how that would play out in terms of your decision process is when you're logging the results of this, you got to have to know that, this is the easiest fairway to hit. So that's why we're really big on adjusted numbers here. So like the results from this tournament and our player models will have essentially like greens and regulation above field average. It doesn't skew everybody's like high GIR numbers. So I fall back to no course fit. That should be the driving principle here.
Gotcha. Yeah, Pete, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, I know we've talked about this before, but like, if a course is really difficult to putt, do you just sort of like not weigh putting at all, or do you look for guys who are really good for putting? Like, which way do you? It seems like you could go either way with it. Same sort of deal here with accuracy. Is it something you don't care about, or you care more about it?
It's interesting. I mean, it's really dynamic week to week and with course to course and with each situation. But, if there's really wide fairways and it's easier to hit fairways, I'm generally going to give a bump to the guys who might be a little less accurate and guys who can bomb it, especially since we don't feel confident with, the course history angle or course fit. I'm going to lean towards just the bombers and the birdie makers and the better scorers on DraftKings. And we say that all the time, but I think it makes a lot of sense here this week.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I guess those guys would be maybe a little undervalued in terms of pricing. So, okay. Well, let's get into the tournament here. We'll go through our players. I definitely want to keep these short. These aren't majors or anything. So we'll definitely roll through these. We don't have a lot of top-tier talent up at the top. Chris Kirk is the highest-priced guy at 11.3. Matt Kuchar, 11.2. Brandt Snedeker, 10.9, going down. Not sort of the top guys that we've seen before. So, let's just work our way through and see who pops in the models, and we'll get through this one. So, we'll start and we'll go sort of our regular tiers. So let's go guys that are 7K and under. Colin, you want to start?
Yeah, who do we got in the value tier this week? Headliner this time is Chad Campbell, and that's pretty consistent with what I've seen before. Decent course history. It's a weak course fit, so I'm not really looking at that. But I just think I'm not surprised that he pops here because he's kind of I've been touting him recently in the value tier bunch. And the results have been pretty good lately. Stuart Sink is also popping pretty high. It's not a great course history either. And he's kind of one of those, grinder types, almost like the poor man's Jim Furyk. Definitely up there in age for sure. But I kind of like him as a cash game type of play. Other people that are kind of like Kyle Reifers continues to be there. I know that last week wasn't his best, but I really, especially from a cash game perspective, I just love his little stat that he has the greatest sample size of anybody on tour. So for better or for worse, he is the most known quantity in arguably the whole tour just because of a high sample size. And the fact that he's popping decently in value is pretty nice. And then if you want an interesting GPP, low volume, high risk flyer, apparent Mortal Kombat character Shang Tsung Pan is really rising up the ranks, and see him all the way at 5,800. I think he's probably my favorite, sub 6K value. There's a lot of risk here because he doesn't have a whole lot of results coming up. But if we're talking about guys that we're pegging as far as like early on, he's definitely never popped before. And I'm taking a look at his results. I guess there's just some hidden there's nothing really obvious beyond some decent showings in November, and there are some miscuts elsewhere. But I think it's you have to go all the way back to what looks like his web.com results, and there's a string of top 20s. So that's my tentative. If we're calling people early, he's probably my favorite. And then I guess the last one, Bud Colley, who I'm sure is popping for a lot of other people. But yeah, those are my favorite in the value tier.
Pete, who you got?
This Pan guy I was going to bring up too at 5,800. He's pretty high in the model. It's a lot of the same guys. I think Reifers is interesting. I think one guy I haven't taken at all, don't even know much about him, is Richie Berinsky. I don't even know who that is. He's up there for some reason relatively. I can't imagine taking him, but pretty much all the names that Colin talked about. One guy who has a lot of pro trends, who's right under the tier, is Stuart Sink, and I certainly think that he makes sense. Really struggling to find some cheap guys relative to other weeks. One of those weeks where a lot of the guys in my model are actually pretty expensive to mid-tier. So, yeah, pretty much similar analysis. I don't have a really strong take other than this Pan guy who's really high. So that's what makes sense to me.
Pan guy. All right. Colin, so, if someone's building models, how do you deal with the field like this? I mean, do you just weigh field score more than usual, just to sort of weed out the guys who have really good adjusted round scores? Because, I mean, if you just build a model and weigh those heavily, but don't weigh field percentage, which it just measures the strength of the field that they usually go against, you get guys that, have done well on like the web.com tour, but those aren't guys that we want, even if they have a good adjusted round scores, right?
Yeah. I think Wawrinski is also kind of a glitchy case like that. Maybe it's not necessarily inflated from web.com, but he doesn't have sufficient sample size for me to even have a strong opinion one way or another. So that's probably why he's popping in models so high. He's an unknown to me, so I would fade Wawrinski like pretty hard. Just from a risk perspective.
That makes total sense to me. He was just popping, and I don't even know who it is.
Yeah, this is basically outlier season, between October and November, where it's the guys that Bryan has talked about exactly. In order to kind of suppress those, I would just essentially wait, like something like sample size and just like how many rounds they have logged in there. And in the case where they'd have a lot of rounds, but it's in second and third tier tours, you got it exactly right. Bump up field strength as being a little bit more important in player models to help kind of keep those guys where they quote unquote should be.
Yeah, and now with our updated player models, you can quickly remove players from your pool. So if you get a guy that's popping in your models, but it's a web.com guy who's played in 2 tournaments and you're just not into him, you can quickly just remove him from your pool of players. So definitely useful. Probably a feature to use this week, I think. All right, let's go up to this next tier. So it's going to be just right above that. So 7-1 up to we'll go up to 8-9. So we'll save Kevin Streelman is at 9-1 up for the next tier. Pete, I'll start with you on this one.
So a ton of guys. Highest rated guy in the model so far is Lucas Glover. Always scary taking him. I mean, if you didn't have to putt, he'd be one of the best golfers on tour. But unfortunately, you do. So take that for what it's worth. If you don't mind investing in someone who's really, really bad at putting, he makes sense. The rest of his stats are fantastic. I like Billy Horschel a lot in this range. I think he's another good guy, kind of towards the expensive range. Swafford's a guy that I know Colin will probably have that I'm pretty bullish on. I like him quite a bit in this range. Then some guys I'm not as sure on that are popping that are interesting. Well, one guy who could be a pretty good play is John Huh. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but John H-U-H, he looks like a decent play. Then one guy that I was really surprised to see somewhat high up is Ryan Blom. Not really sure what to make of him, but certainly he's been playing well the last 4 or 5 tournaments. So I'm curious Colin's opinion on him. I guess the last 6 he's made the cut every time. His worst finish has been 31st. So Colin, your opinion on those guys? And I imagine Swafford is one of the guys up there for you.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all the picks except for the last 2. John Ha has been basically a bottom feeder forever. I mean, like he's been there. I'm shocked. I mean, like the fact that he's at 8,300 just shows you how weak the field is. I have always been like, I can't even say that I've been bearish on him because like he's never really entered like, the mainstream or anything. But I'm looking at, okay, what's been his results lately? He's had a good October. It's made the cut all 4 times, no worse than 39th even in these weaker fields. It's a pretty good showing. But I think his long-term, just the stuff before that, it's not enough for me to pull the trigger at 8,300 by far. There's some pretty gnarly miscuts in July and August and just has the mark of that kind of journeyman type. And then Ryan Blom, similarly, like not enough sample size where I don't have an opinion on him. So I'd take that with a heavy grain of salt. The ones you missed, and maybe you didn't miss them, I swear. I also agree that Glover is probably the top in this tier. We've gone over, how scary it is to pick someone who can't putt Keegan Bradley I don't think he's in the field this week. So, he's there in case you want to scratch that exact itch. This is Lucas Clever is your poor man's Keegan Bradley, I guess. So I'm not sure if you missed these guys or you're just saving them for me on purpose because you knew I'd say them. Harris English, Norbert Castro, seemingly my staples there. Of course, they're going to be high for me. I like them both. I think I have them just after Glover and English. They all kind of like grade out similarly. And if you want maybe a little bit more value in this tier, Brian Harmon is probably my favorite. He's decently cheap. He's just, also has I think second only to Kyle Reifer's a really high sample size, so also a known quantity. And then the interesting guy that's starting to pop in value, but just barely hitting a high sample size is Wesley Bryan. I was always curious about what happens when we're going to get some of these new guys to just what are they going to show and how are they going to pop when they just get enough. Wesley Bryan is tentatively my other one to keep an eye on as far as the rookie crop.
Like that. Definitely Castro I left for you. I didn't. Harris English for some reasons low on my model, but that was too obvious. I had to leave one with Castro. That's your
I appreciate that.
A couple guys I want to ask you about in this tier that I think are a little bit intriguing. First guy, Colin, I'll ask you about, and then I'll ask the other guy for Pete. Cody Gribble, a guy who won a tournament. He won the Sanderson Farms. Yeah, won Sanderson Farms, right? And he has this example of really low field score, but has one of the best recent adjusted round scores. So, in this model that I built, I weighted field score really heavily, and he's still popping. So, I mean, at what point, does a recent play sort of outweigh that?
I don't think there's anything. I mean, I have my rules. My rule is there's no level of recent play that can outweigh insufficient.
You won't roster him.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I don't know enough. There's not enough data to have a strong opinion.
Okay,
I could be missing something huge, but this is my rules are my rules.
Okay, that's definitely fair. And Pete, the next guy I'll ask you about in this tier, 8K, Jamie Lovemark, a guy who is a distance guy, not an accuracy guy at all. But if you're taking the idea that perhaps, if anyone can hit the fairways and anyone can hit the greens, and, a guy who, his name we know from the PGA Tour, can hit the ball a ton and has pretty good results in the last couple months. I mean, is he interesting at all to you?
I think he's interesting. I think he's a little expensive where I like to play, but I like to pay for him normally. But obviously this is a field where it's pretty weak, so he's definitely good. I mean, he has the distance, and if you want to take the upside angle, certainly is there. My issue is I just prefer some guys a little bit more right around him. I mean, Swafford and Castro and those guys I just think are more solid plays in this spot. But if you're playing tournaments, I don't mind exposure to him at all.
Gotcha. Would you say Glover is sort of the best value, per dollar, his salary-wise, he's the best player in the field?
It's right up there for me. I mean, it's hard to say he's the best points per dollar player at that price, but he's certainly up there. Colin, what do you have?
I mean, I don't think he's the best. No, all the best points per dollar are going to be in the bargain bin because it's
the way it works out.
Yeah, it's just the way it works out.
Guys you would use in your cash game is what I'm trying to say.
I don't hate it. I could see that. I've done it before. It's always just all right, what do you do with a guy who can't putt? But I think his big thing is he is the highest projected in the mid tier. That's what I have him as. Okay. Yeah, that's his go-to label this week.
Fair enough. Yeah, he's popping really high. I think in all of our models. All right, let's move up to this last tier. So we'll go 9-1 and above. Colin, I think it's your turn on this one.
All right, so 9-1 and above. Who do we have here? So the top of the field here, I think Kuchar is probably the best of this. Unsurprisingly, the second most expensive is the best of the class. I think Kirk is weirdly right behind him. I guess maybe I was bearish on him before, but I guess models are, data's finally catching up to him. It's a little pricey. I don't know if there's, I think Pete and I are both kind of struggling to fit in value guys that we're really excited about. So if you want to step down a notch, if you want to go in the mid, the low nines, the mid nines, I think Kevin Kisner is probably the best value here. I know it's only, a sample size of 1, but he's probably, even if you want early indicators of course history, he probably has the strongest, almost like the mirror image of Zach Johnson, who probably has the worst over low sample size. Other than that, I think Charles Howell is someone that, he's been a cut maker forever, decent sample size. He's probably like, if I want to go balance, I'll probably put him in a cash game for sure. But yeah, I don't see anybody that's going to, like, there's no Jason Day of this field where there's a clear cut above the rest. And the value probably isn't there to justify, any of the top guys in cash games for sure. So I don't know. I'd stay probably below 10K for all of this. And I'd say Kisner, Howell, and like maybe Bill Haas are probably my favorite in that tier.
Damn, just took everyone. All right, so just in terms of rating right now, my model, Kuchar number 1, Haas number 2, Howell number 3, Kirk number 4. Then I have Furyk. The one guy who's not quite as high, you mentioned Kisner. For some reason, he's not as high in my model, but certainly think he makes sense. I think Bill Haas a decent bit in this spot at 9,800. He normally plays pretty well in these events where he's kind of the class of the field, playing with guys not as high caliber. He's really consistent. I like him quite a bit. So I'll probably go more balanced and maybe pay up for only a couple studs like Haas and Howell, and really fill out the rest of my roster with that mid-tier. So that's kind of where my head's at. And Kuchar, I guess, if you're going to pay up, he's the guy to pay for because he's so consistent in cash games.
Just from like game theory perspective, Pete, we've talked about how in these star-studded events, people will pay whatever for, the Rory McIlroys, the Jason Days, even the Ricky Fowlers of the world, just because they know their names. Do you think there's a bias like, okay, I'm not going to pay 11-3 for Chris Kirk, where it might switch in the game theory plays to actually go stars and scrubs in these smaller fields?
Maybe. It's so hard to know. I mean, there's only so many names that people actually know, so I think people might actually take some of these guys more often, but yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think in these spots, in these small field tournaments, I wouldn't think about game theory too much. I'd just play the guys you think are the best. And if you're building a lot of lineups, make a core of that. And maybe find 1 or 2 guys that you think are, leverage or low-owned guys that you just rotate a lot. But I would worry a lot less about game theory in this spot than just picking the best players. Game theory really does come into play, obviously, in the majors and bigger tournaments where you can get really high-quality golfers in low-owned spots because other guys are soaking up all the ownership. This is a spot where you just have so many unknowns and guys we don't trust. So I just would fire up the guys, and feel good about.
Gotcha. Last question for you, Pete. You said Kisner's not super high in my model as well. He actually won this event last year. So is this a week where, because, what we said earlier with Colin, where, it's just a tournament. We just had it last year, was sort of the first year where they went to this 2-course tournament. So we don't have a ton of data on it, that you're just weighing course stuff less.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's interesting. I mean, I think he should be higher. I still like him, but yeah, that's a good fade for tournaments from a game theory perspective, I think, just because a lot of people look who won and plug them in. So I think that makes sense.
You're always fade the previous winner, Colin, right?
Almost always. I mean, sometimes course history is hard to ignore, but I tend to, especially if it's just like a recency thing. I think that there's not a lot of other course history to back it up. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I even think it may be like it may even be second or third level edge, because if you just browse through schedule, like this tournament was previously called the McCladrey Classic, and it was played on Sea Island, but it's only last year they did this 2-course setup. I think if people are just kind of plugging in standard course history and be like, oh, how have they done at this tournament? Like, they're not catching a new dynamic. So I think that's more than ever reason to fade. Like past winners for sure. Especially, and even like this last year, it's just so much more prone to noise that just picking up on all those little things, looking for edges.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like the fact that it's played on 2 different courses is not like a heavily marketed thing. Like I did pretty extensive research to be ready for this podcast, and I had to do a pretty good amount of research just to find that information out. So I definitely don't think the normal person playing this tournament is going to know that by any means. So definitely interesting, something to think about for sure. All right, let's wrap it up. You guys want to do a regular picks here?
Oh, definitely. All right, I think I'm due to go last at this point.
Okay.
So when do you guys figure out who wants first?
Once Pete gets himself
Yeah,
up.
I'll go. I'll go first, and I'll take an expensive guy, and I'll go Kuchar.
Okay, so we're going above 9K first.
Yeah, and then Colin will get the first pick under 9K.
Okay, I'll go Kirk.
I don't really want him anyway, but the guy that leaves me nobody. Like,
I mean,
I'll go Kevin Chappell. Like, that's like, sure, why not? Because I really don't want to pick Snedeker or Furyk or any of that. And then under 9K, yeah, I gotta go with my label, Glover.
yeah, Glover was the pick. Haas was a great pick too. If we were going above 9K, that first pick. I'm gonna go under 9K. I'll go who, whatever you want to call him.
That's probably a bad pick. I don't know.
I think that is a bad pick. That's an awful pick. Oh my God.
Colin went against him. I'm gonna take. I like this play. I'm happy to get Billy Horschel in this spot relative to the rest of the field. Maybe he'll wear some pink pants and get the win or something.
I was going to go Castro, but Pete, you had talked me into who?
Yeah, well, for those listening, if Colin's saying it's bad, I definitely. I'm not.
It's bad. All right.
I'm leaning. My opinion is very quick to change when Colin says something at this time of the year. So I will be off who or ha or whatever. Probably bad. I can't pronounce.
First step is to figure out how to pronounce his last name, and then the second step is fading him. Yes.
There we go. Done and done.
Yeah, I can't wait till he wins this tournament. It's going to be amazing.
I'll give you if he wins, we'll give you the farmer multiplier like it's Oregon Trail, and then just
I love it. Okay. Well, I love this pick then. Yeah, might as well. Who knows in this tournament? Might as well take an off the board shot here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. Like Colin said earlier, we have a little bit of a break. It doesn't look like there's really anything for the rest of the year. There's some things going on with the PGA, but they probably won't be offered for DraftKings. So I will probably just have December off. So enjoy the holidays and good luck this week. And we'll talk to you guys, I guess, in 2017.